Welcome to the Elementary Administrator's Winter Assessment Training. This is Kiana Hennigan from Assessment Research, and I'm your Student Assessment Coordinator. I'll be leading you through what you need to know today. The goals of this training. By the end of this training, you're going to understand how assessment and research will communicate with you and what our expectations are about communicating with your staff. You know the basics of winter assessments. Who is going to test? When will it happen? How will people be trained? And what do you need to do? You're going to learn about what you can do to start preparing for spring testing. You're going to learn expectations around accommodations and supports for state and national assessments. You're going to learn about how to ensure that testing runs smoothly in your school. What can you do now to plan ahead? And of course, the most important thing that I hope you learn is that you can always call, email, or Teams your friends here in assessment and research for help. We are literally standing by to support you. And please feel comfortable giving us a call. We are looking forward to hearing from you. I'm not going to read for you the entire agenda of this training, but please know that I have some exciting stuff coming ahead as we approach that SBA and WACUS, some new stuff for you guys, and I think you're going to really like it. So try to stay awake with me. I'm going to be as brief as possible, and I'm super excited to share some new supports with you. Before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about Smokey Bear. I will put Smokey on various slides or documents sometimes just to remind you that this is a thing that you can do now before the rush of testing season to ensure that you have a nice, comfortable testing season. So much like Smokey wants us to fully extinguish our campfires to prevent forest fires, I want you to make sure that your data is coming through nice and clean so that your students are able to test when the time comes, for example. So please look for Smokey the Bear to appear on some of these slides, just to remind you that this is something that you should be thinking about now for future you to have a nice later. All right, you probably recognize this year at a glance. This is the blue calendar in its newest iteration. I want to draw your attention to This Is Us right here now in this nice, clean, white space. There's not a whole lot of blue stuff going on here. That's WIDA Screener, which happens all year. So to begin with, WIDA Access. There are a number of WIDA assessments. WIDA Access is the annual accountability test, and it tests English language proficiency. This is what your students who qualify for EL services, your multilingual learners, they are taking this test, and the students who demonstrate proficiency on this test are then exited from EL services. The expectation for this is that that would happen within 6 years. Who's going to test? Any student in grades K through 12 who qualify for English language services. So that could include Title III, it could include your multilingual learners. You're going to want to pay attention to make sure everybody gets tested. The window starts January 29th. Generally speaking, I don't let anyone start online tests that first week. The first week, there's always lots of glitches. So mainly who would be testing on the 29th might be kindergartners who have a paper pencil test. Testing goes all the way till March 22nd. I would not delay your testing. It always takes longer than we think to cycle kids through. We always have absences. You're going to want to test in a timely fashion and not wait until that kind of mid to late March season. Proctor trainings are held by my department in categorical. We're co-facilitating those trainings, and those will occur in January. Check your building plans for dates specific to you. The administrator training, this is it. This is what you're going to get for your training. Obviously, if you have questions, it would be really great if you'd reach out to myself or to your ML department facilitator, Christy or Allie or Erica, and they can also help with questions on that. Your building plan for this test is out. It came out in the principal's packet. You have it in your hot little hands, and it is due December 15th before you go away for break so that I can have an engaging reading during that time. So what are your admin duties? Goal one is you need to select a school coordinator. This is the administrator who's officially in charge of testing, and they're going to work with your multilingual designate or your coach at your school to plan everything and be officially responsible for that activity. That's usually the principal. It could be the assistant principal. It depends on whoever's over ML at your school. You guys are going to complete your building plan and get it turned in on time by December 15th. You are going to ensure that all of your paper booklets, which would be kindergarten and then first through third grade writing booklets, are all securely stored. That means that your ML designate has a location somewhere convenient to them that they have the key to store those documents. If you think you need something rekeyed or you need help with that, please reach out to myself or your facilitator. Ensure that staff attend training. We will offer trainings and we always end up having to do a makeup here or there, but it's really important that the staff attend the training. We cannot do individualized makeups for every member of staff, so please make sure that they are able to attend and that they're freed from their other duties for that purpose. Please make sure that they have appropriate testing spaces, that they have coverage of their regular duties, and that if there are any interruptions planned for that day, special drills or announcements, that everybody is aware that testing is occurring in your building. We sometimes have shortages of testing space. We sometimes have, for example, highly capable testing going on in schools at the same time as WIDA. It's very important that we think carefully about how we organize rooms. If you give a small group room to your high cap testing facilitators and a big room to your WIDA access proctors, you may find that you need to switch that around. WIDA access is probably not going to be administered in a large group, but high cap can. So make sure you're having good conversations with your office manager and thinking critically about your spaces and talking with your ML designates about that. Please touch base with your designate weekly to review progress. There should be a progress email from the ML department that's going to come and help your designate to troubleshoot any problems that come up. If they don't have a room or if they're having a lot of student absences, help them figure out how to deal with that problem. You're going to report all your incidents in ARMS in a timely fashion. Generally speaking, the incidents are reported directly to me right away, either verbally or via email, and then I will indicate the level of urgency in reporting the incident, but the rule is within 24 hours. And then, of course, you're going to submit all your paperwork by March 25th. Well in advance of March, I will make sure that you get a checklist in the principal's packet to remind you of what expectations are. I won't go through them now and then expect you to remember them all later. Thinking a little bit about that goal of 6 years that we talked about. Progress towards proficiency for our ML students, exiting our ML students, is part of the Washington School Improvement. We really need to be thinking about our students and getting test scores out of them that are reflective of what they're able to do. That's part of making sure students aren't tested at the last second, making sure students have appropriate testing environments. We really want to facilitate that students are able to show what they know to the best of their abilities. So thinking about that, how do we improve our ML progress? What can we do? We could provide the accommodations and supports with fidelity. We can make sure our teachers know how to support our students. And we have duly qualified students who need things like a scribe or use special buttons on the screen. Let's make sure that we're giving students the things that they need and showing them how to use them. We're going to review our students' situations individually to make sure their supports are being correctly identified. There are some kind of Baroque rules about WIDA, and we want to make sure that we're thinking about each student on an individualized basis, making sure that the supports that they need are being provided. We're going to make sure that the test is being provided in an appropriate and supportive setting. That's really important for our students. We don't want to have them in a scary, weird environment like a broom closet, taking a test that would be not conducive to showing what you know. We're going to make sure that all of our staff have the training and support that they need to meet the needs of their students in a variety of contexts. And that's not just your proctors who are giving the test and not just ML teachers and specialists. We're thinking about all of your staff. How do all of your staff meet the needs of multilingual learners in regular classroom settings, in PE, everywhere we go? And that's using that Project GLAD model, that's using PSYOP. We need to be thinking critically about how to support our students across the board. All right, so we had WIDA access. Now we have the WIDA alternate access. The ALT test is what a lot of people call it. This is the annual accountability test for students with significant cognitive disabilities. These are students who take WAAIM. If they're in third grade and above, these are students with significant cognitive disabilities, that 2 standard deviations below in cognitive and adaptive on their tests. So taking WIDA Alt Access is important. We're measuring progress students, making sure that they're learning things, but they're not going to exit English language services using Alt Access at this time. So who are we giving this test to? This is for students in grades K through 12 who qualify for English language services and have that significant cognitive disability. The window is the same as the regular access, the 29th of January through March 22nd. This is a paper pencil test, so if someone wanted to, they can start on January 29th. The proctor training is facilitated by myself from assessment and research, as well as special services, and it's intended for those special services staff members who are giving the assessment. There's no administrator training. Of course, you're welcome to attend a WIDA Alt Access training if you'd like. I'd be delighted. But we know that you probably don't have time. The building plan is due December 15th, and you have some duties you want to think about. I want you to be successful in this assessment. So let's start with select your school coordinator. This is the person who's going to coordinate with case managers and paras. So be thinking about who is the right person who's already dealing with special services, special education on a regular basis. That's your WIDA Alt Access coordinator, in my view. You're going to complete that building plan and get it in by December 15th. I totally understand that you may not know the exact dates of testing, but it might be a good idea to start thinking about that calendar ahead of time. I'm not going to call you and say, on what day is Bob taking his reading portion of his WIDA Alt Access, for example. But I do want an indication that you're thinking about which days you're going to proctor and how you might cover those classroom duties that the person normally is undertaking. You're going to work with case managers to select appropriate proctors and ensure that they attend training. So this person could be a case manager, they can be a paraeducator, but you need to consider how the proctor will be trained and how the test will be administered without enormous disruption to the class. So it's possible that it might be better for students if the proctor is not the teacher. There is testing time that will require that person's attention. And so you need to think really on an individualized level about your staff and your staffing needs to make the decision about who the person is to send to have them trained. This person should know the students and be able to understand the idiosyncratic communication style that the students have. So we often find that students in these situations have disabilities that will complicate how they communicate. We need the person who understands that communication of that student to be able to provide that assessment. They need to be able to work without significant management on completing testing on time. So a good candidate is someone who does not need a lot of support either from a teacher or from an administrator on ensuring that this testing actually occurs. And now page 2 of administrator duties, we're right here. They need to be able to administer assessment in a one-on-one environment successfully, meaning there's not going to be someone there to supervise them. They're going to give that test in perhaps the back of a classroom or in a separate space altogether from the regular room the student's in. You need to also consider you have a certain number of students who need to be tested, and what is the ability of your staff to complete that testing? If you are sending one person and you have 15 kids to test, how are you going to cover their normal work? And are they going to be able to complete testing in the amount of time allotted? How much support are they going to need to do that? How are you going to handle that? You're going to also ensure that there's appropriate storage space. I would recommend that these tests be stored along with your other WIDA materials, um, and that the ML coach at your school or whoever's supporting ML, the designee, is the person who kind of keeps an eye on these materials. They'll have their own materials, and I think a lot of the time it's best to keep them together. You're going to make sure that your staff have access to appropriate testing spaces, whether that is a small space in the back of your room where the student normally sits, or if that's a separate testing space, you're going to ensure that your proctor has the space they need to give this test successfully. It's important that you touch base with your proctor to check on test progress. I would start doing that around the first week of March. How far are you? What sort of help do you need? What are troubles that are coming up for you? Those are the kinds of things I would talk about with my proctor. And just make sure that you're on track for on time completion. We did have a little hurry up and rush right towards the end of the window last year. And we don't want to have that. That's not good for your staff and it's not good for your students. So please ensure that you are pacing yourself. You're going to report any incidents in ARMS, that's in EDS. You're going to submit your paperwork by March 25th, and I will send you a checklist to make sure that you know what you need to do, and you'll have that information right when you need it. All right, don't forget, I know this is a lot of WIDA. There's also still that WIDA screener, that blue line that we saw on the blue calendar going all the way across the school year. That is still going on. So please make sure that you're still ensuring that there are appropriate spaces and coverage and all that jazz. Even when we're going into all these other testing windows, WIDA will still be happening. Even we're in the depths of SBA, there will still be WIDA screener. So please make sure you're attending to that and making sure that you're reporting your incidents in ARMS. If you previously had an incident, please note that ARMS is now functioning. So I'll be reaching out to you to remind you to submit officially any incidents you might have had at the beginning of the year. Those will need to go into ARMS now. If you have that email flagged and waiting for entry and you're excited to get that flag into a check mark on your Outlook, go ahead and start doing that now. I will be in touch with you when we are back from break to ensure that that has occurred. The paperwork for this test will be due by June 10th, along with the rest of your spring testing, and I'll be sending you a checklist at that time to remind you of what I need from you. Okay, switching gears to WAKIDS. We just finished WAKIDS November 15th for standard kindergarten. This is that state mandated 3-part program about kindergarten transitions and kindergarten readiness. That data that is entered into teaching strategies. I will start loading your students' information into teaching strategies in February, early February, so that your staff could get their data entered by March 29th. The training for this test is facilitated by OSPI and is handled solely by them. If you're curious about WAKIDS and you haven't already done so, you're welcome to take a self-paced online course. I also have a little instruction sheet for principals that you can peruse and familiarize yourself with the assessment. There is no building plan for WAKIDS. Of course, your duties are to make sure early learning is aware of any staffing changes, to ensure that office managers are creating SSIDs and promptly assigning their students to classes, that you're providing support for any teachers that need it, and that you're making sure that data entry is completed by March 29th. You will be receiving notifications from the pre-K 5 department about completion, so please attend to those if they need any help from you in getting that information in. Now, if your school does not have transitional kindergarten, you can wash all of that from your mind. This is only for transitional K. I'll be back in the fall to talk about regular WAKIDS then. Switching gears to early literacy assessment, that is not what kids. So, what do we have? We have the schedule up. We've got those optional window dates that are in the slightly lighter color. I want you to be attentive to what is optional and what is required. Please note that January 2nd, the day we return from winter break, we're going to have that iReady window open. We could start doing our ORF and our RAN. Please note the expectations is that iReady Math will be in by February 9th and everything else by the 16th. Grades 3, 4, and 5, we're expecting the 9th. Just because they do not have the extra early literacy tasks. And then, of course, looking ahead to spring, you'll see those optional windows also there. All right, let's move on. Elementary iReady administrator responsibilities. Please ensure that either you, as an administrator, are assigning the diagnostic to all the applicable students in your school, or that your teachers know how to assign and when to assign their diagnostics. If you're assigning it, you can hide the diagnostic. A teacher is able to hide a diagnostic so that they can allow students to access it specifically when they want them to. There are instructions for that in the principal's packet, the Outlook for December. And I'll run it again right when we get back from break. And please make sure that someone is designated to regularly monitor the learning path and make sure intervention is conducted weekly. Please make sure that there's some sort of plan for that intervention. Who's going to intervene? What are they going to do? And when are they going to do it? Please make sure your staff are properly trained. If you have any new teachers and they need to know about iReady, send them on over here. Email Justine Palabrica, and she'd be happy to make sure that we get your staff all trained up. You're going to make sure that your students are properly assessed in compliance with district practices and state law. You're going to regularly monitor proper completion of early literacy assessment data entry, meaning that the correct test is given in the correct way and the data is entered on time. You're going to make sure if you have any staff who are new or you lose any staff that we're making sure those user permissions are getting updated. Once again, that's a thing you can talk to Justine Palabrica about. We're going to also want to make sure that as we approach the summer, you're going to be looking for principals packets and other details, email from Dr. Matthews about that intervention data. What did you do in terms of interventions? How did you handle it? We're going to make sure we collect up that information and get it entered in a timely fashion before the deadline. All right, moving on to NAEP, the nation's report card. This is that congressionally mandated online assessment in a variety of subjects. We're not getting scores back or anything like that. If you're a NAEP school, you've already been identified. What we are looking for now, as we're approaching that winter NAEP window, is please make sure that your field tech is aware of what is needed and is available on your test date. There's going to be a little half-hour planning meeting that we need to have with the NAEP people to make sure that all the internet and everything are going to work great. That's a thing that you're going to want to make sure your field tech is booked for that half-hour meeting, and you're going to want to make sure that your field tech is going to be physically present when the NAEP staff arrive and start to try to connect to our internet. We don't want to have any problems with our internet on that testing day. Soon we're going to be getting our lists of who's going to be taking the test, and you're going to need to upload some student information about your students. Please make sure you do so by the deadline. And if you need help pulling down some of that data, I am happy to work with you on that. So just shoot me an email or give me a call. And then please make sure that you have an appropriately sized testing space booked now so that you will be able to have a good location for students to take the test. This needs to be a spot where they have like reasonably acceptable internet access. So please do put some thought there. Ask your field tech if you need help with that. And then, of course, the orange box is just a reminder this is new. NAEP has never used our Wi Fi before, so we want to be extra careful to make sure that all of our tech staff are on hand and ready to assist with this assessment. So please do make sure we're preparing properly. All right. This year's School Stakeholder Annual Survey, the SAS. This is an important survey. We use the results of it to make significant decisions here in the district. So please make sure all staff are provided a good opportunity to take the test. We're also going to send it out to families and remind our families to please take the survey, as well as ensuring that our students in grades 3 through 12 have access to and are provided time for the purpose of completing the survey. The window for staff is now January 16th through February 16th, whereas the window for students and families is February 26th through March 29th. That's a little adjustment from how we have had the dates in the past, so please make sure, for example, if you're planning to use a staff meeting to fill out that staff survey, that you have a staff meeting scheduled during the time when you can give that survey. Please see your building plan for more details on that. There's no training, but speaking of building plans, it is due September 5th or September. But speaking of building plans, that building plan is due December 15th. Administrator duties. You're going to complete that building plan. You're going to send your communications. You're going to ensure that people are participating by doing the following. You're going to check your participation rates in Panorama on Mondays and take action if participation is low. For example, you're going to go into the school menu and look at student comparison response rates. You'd be thinking, where is Bob's class? Bob's class seems to be missing from your completion rates. Give that reminder to your staff about giving the survey. These students are here as a captive audience. It should not be impossible for us to have a goal of at least 90% student participation. So please, let's maintain a goal of 90%, and we're going to give that survey to our students. We're going to think carefully about how to facilitate that in our schools. We're going to send our reminders to our families. We want to get good results here. Switching gears to spring, WAAIM, which is the accountability assessment in ELA math and science for students with significant cognitive disabilities. These are students who don't access SBA or WACAS because it is not appropriate for them. It's administered in a one-to-one environment, generally by the student's case manager, and then the scores of what the students have earned have been reported through the DRC Insight website. So who tests? Qualifying students in grades 3 through 8, 10, and 11. The window is January 29th through May 3rd. This is a nice big window. But teachers are doing a lot of tasks, and they need to have all of their tasks completed and all of their data entered by April 24th. The proctor training is facilitated by Special Services and Assessment and Research. Bevan and I did that earlier in the year, and your staff should have all been trained. We had 100% completion of staff training. There is no further administrators training than this that you're sitting at. Your building plan is again due December 15th. Your admin duties, you're going to select a school coordinator. This is probably the person who's overseeing special education at your school. You're going to complete your building plan. You're going to ensure that Penny Bravo is notified of new WAAIM students right away. She has to manually change some things for each student. So please, if you have new WAAIM students, make sure that your case managers are notifying Penny right away. You're going to Review the status email that you get from me on April 25th or 26th, and I will let you know, are you done and everything's great, or is there somebody who's not yet done? Please follow up with anyone who is not yet done and ensure that they are done by May 3rd. May 3rd is a hard deadline. Anything not entered by that time will not be scored by the state. The student will receive a 0, which will be used for accountability for your school in our district. So please make sure that everything is swimming along and done, preferably by April 24th. And if you hear that it's not done from me, please ensure that it will be done by May 3rd. Please submit your paperwork by the following Monday, May 6th, and a checklist will be available for you in April. And I will also email you that checklist when I let you know if your school is done or not. So you'll know exactly what your next steps will be. I'll tell you exactly when I need them. Interim assessment blocks. These are those online interim assessments in English and math that are administered through WCAP applications. Those are open now. Generally, students in grades 3 through 12 have them available. I do have second graders loaded into Tide, so I guess if you wanted a second grade student to do one of those, they can do that. You just may need to make some settings adjustments, which I'd be happy to do for you. Shoot me an email if you want second graders to access any of these materials. The window for interim assessment blocks is generally November through June. There's probably some strategy to think about when you're giving interim assessments in terms of that June window. I'm happy to discuss that with you at any time. Your proctor training is really school facilitated, or if you want to invite me over, I'd be happy to facilitate a training for a team of teachers who wanted to do interim assessment blocks. I can also supply you with that slide deck. Let me know. This is your admin training, but I could do further training if you'd like it. I'd be happy to come and visit you at any time. You have no building plan for this assessment, but your main administrator duties are thinking about does your staff know what they need to know? And if they don't, you're scheduling trainings. And then does your staff know about like any changes to the systems or support materials that they need to know about? All of the new materials and those changes to systems, which are pretty minimal, have been made available in the principal's packet about interim testing. If you need a refresher on that, I'd be happy to also resend it to you. Just let me know how to support you in this work. Please, when you are giving interim assessment blocks, it's really important that we don't forget about supports and accommodations. These interim assessments are a really good opportunity to make sure that students know how to use their supports and can practice their use of their supports and accommodations. When I say that this is an opportunity to ensure that students know how to use their supports and accommodations. In this case, I mean, ensure means going through all the steps of planning and training. So your teacher knows how the student's supposed to use their supports and shows the student how to use their supports, and the student then can use those supports in the test, just to be clear. All right, Tide management. Tide is the test information distribution engine, and that is where all of our student data lives that feeds into the test. Who is the kid? What supports should they have? Who's their teacher? All that stuff we push into Tide to ensure that your student has access to all the right things. This is where we load centrally IEP and 504 supports and accommodations, as well as multilingual learner supports. We're going to do that IEP 504 support load January 16th. That is the date that special services will be pushing those into the system. And the ML team will be pushing them in the following day. That's when all the ML supports will be refreshed. Rosters will not be re-uploaded until February 12th. If you have teachers giving interims, they may need to ask for some manual changes to those rosters between now and then. Spring loads will be in March. Dates are currently being negotiated. Let's think about how we manage Tide in schools. Your Tide account is managed by a Tide manager. You should have already identified and asked for training for that Tide manager. If you have not identified someone, I strongly suggest that you identify somebody to do your Tide management as soon as possible and then get them trained. You'll notice in the orange box, Tide management trainings. I have one November 28th, one December 6th, and one January 9th. All of those are on Zoom. The links are all in the principal's packet. And the password's always Tide. If you want anyone to come, you can also have them directly email me, and I will send them a calendar invite to ensure that they are able to attend. And I can also do them at a different time than 3 p.m. 3 p.m. is just a convenient time for Zooms because everybody's out of school. But I can do a different one. Shoot me an email. The next task that should already be done is someone should have reviewed and updated your staff in Tide. So in August, we loaded your staff. If you have an identical staff from before the school year started, then you don't need to be worried about it. But if you had one person leave or a new person come up or you have someone out on leave, we need some updates in Tide. Your Tide manager should be doing that, and I will train people on how to do that in my Tide manager trainings. Next steps. We loaded already ML supports and IEP supports. You should be looking for new students who are ML or IEP 504 students and coding their supports. This may mean that your Tide manager needs to sit with your case manager and look at, for example, IEPs from other districts look a little different than ours. Please make sure that you're facilitating coordination between all of your departments to make sure your updates get into Tide. It would be a big bummer if your student did a bunch of IABs without the tools that they need to be successful. The data wouldn't be very reliable, and they also wouldn't have practiced for the spring SBA. So we want to make sure that those get done. We also want to look. Sometimes students will transfer to us, and when they appear in our Tide for our school, they'll have stuff that came over with them. It is always worth your while just to say, I'm just going to check and see what the student brought with them into our Tide. We expect students to start showing up in Tide about 8 days of their enrollment, somewhere within there. If it has been 8 days or longer and a student hasn't shown up in Tide, I would recommend that you contact LMS via help desk ticket and ask if there's something wrong with the student's registration. 8 days is about my recommendation. If you need a student in right away because their whole class is doing an interim assessment the next day, that's the thing you should shoot me an exclamation point urgent email about, and I will do my very best to get them manually entered into the system as soon as possible. Okay, let's think a little bit about our SBA and WACAS tasks. So, IEP teams should be thinking about already when they're selecting their accommodations. So automatically be asking themselves some guiding questions. Is it relevant to the student's disability? Does the student know how to use the accommodation, or have they had or they're about to have some experience with it? We don't want to spring new stuff on students on the state test. That's already a little bit of a high pressure environment for the student. We don't want to really send them for a loop by giving them new stuff at the last minute. So let's think about that as well at those IEP meetings. And then the third question is, will the student be able to and interested in accessing this tool, or are there some other barriers? For example, we have students who will not wear headphones. They're not comfortable. They're upsetting to the student. I would not want to say, oh, yes, the student's measurement of their knowledge and abilities is dependent on them wearing a headset. We're going to be realistic and take into account our students' needs and individual wants when we are picking our accommodations. So that should already be happening in our IEP meetings. The next steps are to make sure that the supports and accommodations are coded in Tide. If you're a principal and you're in an IEP meeting, they want new supports and they're going to use them before February, you're going to need to make sure that they're hand entered by your Tide manager. You're going to want to identify who is going to train the student on the use of their tools and when that might occur. They need to know how to use the tool in order to be successful. If they've never seen the tool and you hand them the tool, It's a 50-50 chance whether they would be able to use it. And you're going to think about any additional needs. Does a student need a physical tool? Do they need a specific proctor, or do they need a proctor who's trained in a specific thing? We want to be thinking about those additional needs as we're looking towards spring and we're planning for our SBA. Administrators, you want to start blocking out some time. You want to block out your time for your proctor training. You want to block out your time for how are you going to administer things? When are you going to be giving training or practice tests? How urgently are those needed? Did you already do them earlier in the year prior to giving an interim, for example? Think about your timing and start thinking about it now. And then, of course, how will you schedule testing? It's a really important thing. Let's think again about our accommodations and supports. You need to be planning it out. See, Smokey the Bear is up there in the corner, lurking ominously to remind us to do our due diligence. As you see, this is a lovely map that I found on Google. I have not read it very closely, so hopefully there's nothing weird on there. Moving on, here's a plane in the upper left-hand corner, and the plane needs to get to its destination. And what do we need? We need a plan. We need to map out how we're going to get there. So in order to get to this destination, we need to know who is going to teach the student how to use the support. When are they going to do that? The student will not spontaneously know where the button lives, and they are unlikely to find it all by themselves. Someone has to teach them, and there needs to be time for that someone to do it. So let's start that planning right then. Next destination. When is the student going to practice using the support? So someone will show them the button, but are they going to show them the button 2 months ahead of time, and then they're going to forget all about the button, and they're going to give them the test? Who's going to give that student practice opportunities? When is it going to be? If the student needs a physical support, they need a person or an abacus, who's going to provide those items? Who's going to be the scribe? Who's going to bring the abacus? When are you going to meet the student about the support to revise it if needed? Let's say I'm like, oh yeah, the student's going to totally use this abacus. And then it turns out the student didn't touch the abacus one time during practice because they don't know how to use an abacus. They need a lot more abacus support. Who's going to go in there and say, just kidding, please don't make this poor student have an abacus during the test? Who's going to do that? When are you going to have that meeting to talk to the student about that abacus? And then finally, on the testing date, who's going to do any special proctoring? Who's going to bring those special tools and supervise that they exist? And where is this going to happen? If the student has a scribe, where are they going to take that test? That fits them and that fits in your plan. If I am running a test, I'm going to think about all of these steps way, way, way back, not as I'm approaching the X, the end, the destination of the student getting access to the supports they need to be successful. I want to start thinking about this map way back here when I'm just a lowly little plane on a random airstrip somewhere in, I don't know where that is, middle of America someplace. Like that is where I am thinking about these steps. I'm not waiting and deciding each step as I go. As I go is not a good plan. Let's talk more about practicing supports and accommodations. Look at this thingy. This is an icon. An icon is a simple line drawing that represents a more complex image, a more complex thing. What do you think this thing is? What if I told you it's that? What do you think that thing is? This thing is a toaster. Yep, it toasts bread. This is an old fashioned toaster. So, if I am giving a test to a student and I want an icon that represents a toaster, do I want this thingy or do I want that thingy? Toaster, also a toaster. Toaster. I want the one that the student understands. That's the one I want, right? Well, tough. because in our assessment, this is the icon for recording. This is an old-timey microphone. Students don't know what that is. Students know this, the red dot. That is what recording means to them. So going back and thinking about our toaster, if I gave you this symbol and I said, this symbol and an arrow, would you know what I was doing? Would you know what I was asking? Yeah, no, you wouldn't. You would want this toaster. This is what you'd want. But what if I put a little energy into saying, hey, when you see this toaster, it means this toaster? That's what we need people to do. So, how are we ensuring that students know what this symbol means? We're going to make sure that they have opportunity to practice. We're going to say, hey, we're going to practice this. This is the record button. Okay, so now push the button. Where's the record button? And wait for the student to push the record button. In order for this to be successful, in order to plan this, we need to identify who's going to train the student on the support. How are they going to train it? When are they going to train it? Do they know how to use the practice and training tests? Are they going to use some other system? Who's going to do it? How is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Do they need any stuff? Are there supports that they need to use it? If we're using an abacus, they need the abacus. Who's going to train them to use the abacus? Who's going to bring the abacus? I know this sounds very redundant and obvious, but it isn't happening at every school every time. I can tell you that for a fact. I hear about all the time students who had access to a button and never used it because they didn't know what it was. Who's going to make sure that they know how to use speech to text, for example, in the WACAP portal? Who's going to say that's the speech to text button? And when are they going to do it? And how are they going to do it? And are they going to give the student the little headset with the little microphone on the practice opportunity? And then again, are they going to make sure that the student has those things for the actual assessment? If I'm using speech to text, I need a microphone, a little headset like the one I'm wearing right now. We're going to think ahead about these things. Switching gears, we have some new math and science supports for Spanish speakers. So now ML staff are going to be able to identify students in advance who have strong written Spanish skills, who can read and write while in Spanish. Those students are going to be able to be coded, and then they're going to be able to toggle on the Math SBA between Spanish and English. It's very exciting. We're also going to be able to provide some new supports for Spanish speakers in terms of text to speech. Text to speech will now work in whichever language the test is being presented in, whether that's English or whether that's Spanish. It will read to you in English if that's appropriate, or in Spanish if that's appropriate. And students will be able to have that read aloud through the normal text to speech button, where they can choose between having the whole question or just an option read. Students who can read Spanish will be able to see all of their buttons will be presented in Spanish, but their text to speech will read whatever language is on screen. We've got some updated designated supports for ML Students document. It covers a lot of exciting new things. So the top section on the front page covers all the designated supports that all ML students get. What are they? They're all those. If you look down below, it reminds us of how we're going to train our students on the use of these supports. Additionally, we've got some guidance around how to select additional supports for ML students. Like I mentioned previously, if the student has had math and science content in Spanish, they'll have the opportunity to see the test in Spanish. That is one of those supports that's coded as an additional support for consideration. And the reason that's an additional support for consideration is that somebody who's familiar with your student has to know how the student reads. They need to know what the student's experiences are. And that's something that only someone at your school can do. That's not something that we in the central office would know about your student. And then below, we have some reminders about the NNEP and rail policies around participation and accountability. The thing that I want to draw your attention to right now seems to be a very little known fact. On that Math SBA, any student can answer in Spanish, English, or a mix of both languages. There are biliterate scorers who will handle those responses. You don't have to code anything, you don't have to do anything special. That's just a norm of testing. That is fine. They could respond on that Math SBA in either language or both. All right, some additional new things. I made you present. It's called the ML default upload document, and this is how you code new ML students for the designated supports that we give district-wide. If you need to code a student quickly in between the district loads, I have made you an Excel template, and you can use that template to code the student with the supports really quickly. You just drop their SSID in and you pick what language you want their glossary in, and then you can very quickly upload it to Tide. I also made you cute little pictorial instructions so that you can quickly do that and not have any confusion as to whether or not you've done it correctly. So those are new and those are available in DocuShare already for you, so you can go in and load one by one the supports, all of the supports at once for one student when you have a new student who is ML. I'm also in the middle of building you some other great stuff. I'm in the middle of making an ML designated support training set for your teachers. There's going to be a video, which I was going to have like all cute and pretty on this page for you, but I had to wait on the video so that I can get this presentation recorded and get it out to you guys in a timely fashion. But I also made a reference sheet. So the idea is that your teacher can watch the video. It would show them how ML students access all their various little sports, and then a cheat sheet so that at the time that your teachers are giving these tests, they can highlight for students in the practice test, for example, where they can actually find their tools. Um, so it's a really exciting document. I'm really excited for your teachers to have the opportunity to use the tool. But I did make them with the idea that they would be used in tandem. So please don't just like hand out this kind of confusing looking paper document to your teachers. I would be stressed out by it if I were a teacher, and I'm sure your teachers would be super stressed out by it too, because it is crowded. But it's meant to be a reminder, not a teaching tool. Okay, assessment security. Please remember that any district employee or a contractor, which could be a nurse or behavioral support or a student teacher, any of those people who are not proctoring, but who might be physically present during testing, for example, during the WIDA test or during any of our other assessments, are going to need to complete the security packet. That being said, please keep random people out of testing rooms. Please be sure that you're notifying staff. Hey, we have WIDA testing in the building. Please look for signs on doors. We don't want random people in there, even if they have been security trained. And we also don't want to schedule testing rooms where people are going to be coming and going and coming and going constantly. We want to make good choices. For example, if we're testing in the library and the librarian needs to quietly walk through to get to their office, that's fine. But we wouldn't be giving a test in a shared office where other staff are coming and going and kind of constantly distracting the student. Please, just a reminder as we're approaching WIDA and there are booklets, these need to be locked up in a limited access secure location. They cannot go through district mail. They will be hand delivered by appropriate personnel, which is either assessment or categorical personnel. We will hand deliver them to you and we'll request that they be delivered back to us by hand, or we'll go get them ourselves. Please do not put them through any form of mail. Final note on secure booklets. We will put a sign in and sign out sheet inside the box. We strongly recommend that you use that sign in and sign out sheet. Please ask your teachers to use it to keep track of when they collect materials out of the box. Just as an added piece of security, we don't want something to go missing and not be able to figure out who had it last and have to tear things apart. So please be thoughtful about that. All right, communications. You've seen the slide, but I want to run through it again. We send you guys the calendar at the beginning of the year. If you need to see it again, please email me, but that should be forwarded out to your leadership team so that people in your school know what's going on. Every month, we publish a monthly assessment outlook. This is to reduce how many times you have to hear from me. This is literally the purpose, is to prevent me from constantly emailing you. So I make this outlook. They come out the first week, like right either before the first or around the first of each month. Please make sure that you're skimming through it and looking for stuff that applies to you and then forwarding it out. Make sure people in your school are receiving this information. Um, we also send that out via communications principals. We also have bigger principal packets that we send out, and those primarily are about action items. Um, we'll repeat things in the monthly outlook, but when we need you to do a thing, we'll put it in communications to principals, and it's really important that you're forwarding it to your relevant staff in a timely fashion. We don't want you to be late because somebody didn't get asked to do something until the day it's due. Please make sure that you're reviewing those principals packets. And I know you're super busy, and if you're having a hard time getting through the packets, maybe there's somebody in your office who has some good informational text comprehension skills that you can trust with that activity, to review it and maybe give you the Cliffs Notes, whatever it takes to make sure it happens. If I email you, it is because I was specifically instructed to email you, or because there's something very timely or specific to your school that needs to occur. Usually, this is an action item. I try so hard not to email you. So if I do email you, please attend to it promptly. Let's look ahead to spring. Spring building plans are going to be provided to you in February, and they're going to be expected back in March. I will also have in-person administrator trainings for the spring. Those will be happening in late February. If you have any questions before then, you'll know where to reach me. Those administration trainings, though, those will be in person. I'll be debuting a new proctor training and some interesting changes for spring assessment. So please make sure that you are able to attend. Invitations have already gone out, so check your calendars. All right, coming up in the spring, we've got the AP test for you high school folks. We've got the iReady diagnostic coming up. April 29th, it will open. We've got Smarter Balance and WACAS, as well as WAAM will be coming due before our next training. So I'll give you guys some reminders about that at the spring training. Do you need help? I am not going to read this big list of people who are literally standing by at all times for the purpose of helping you, but I want to remind you, like, my name is featured very prominently on this list, and even if it says someone else, if you can't reach that person, if you're struggling, if you forget, you can always call me and I will get you to the person you need. So I want you always to know that we are waiting to support you here at the CRC, and we can't wait to be helpful. And that's it. That is the end of today's presentation. Thank you so much for your patience and attention during this training. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope that you are doing well. Please don't forget to complete your survey so that you get credit for attending. As well as keep in mind that I do have some office hours coming up that'll be in the email you receive this link with, and I am eager to answer any questions you have. So take a look at your building plans, generate some smart questions, or some not as smart questions. There's no dumb questions, and I will be excited to help you. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.